All right, everybody. So, chapter 5, the final part of New Genesis' first arc in the story, has just finished, and it's a lot. They kind of really dumped a lot of us in this chapter 5 of the story, this final chapter, and there's kind of a lot we learned, kind of stuff that confirmed stuff we could have probably sussed out already, and some new questions and a new big bad on the horizon. There was a lot, especially at the end. It just sort of dumped so much information on us all at once. It was very hectic, but let's sort of get into it. And for now, I'm not going to include any footage of the chapter of the story in case you still haven't played through it yourself and you want to see it for yourself. But let's go ahead and talk about some of the things we learned real quick. First of all, Halpha itself is essentially one big testing ground for an experiment led by this guy called Zaveto. I think I mispronounced that, on the floating island above Halpha Lake, which is called Lucille. And essentially the goal of this experiment was to recreate the former glory of arcs, because essentially right now the current events are happening about 1,000 years past, presumably 1,000 years about after the end of base PSO2, and essentially, in times of peace, arcs grew much weaker, and 500 years previously, we were attacked by some unknown alien thing that we're calling the Starless, and basically they fucked us up real good, and then they just left. But now they're back, so that's our problem now. And essentially we're all clones, it made in order to try and recreate that old power that we used to have. So basically your new Genesis character is a clone of your base PSO2 character if you played base PSO2. If you came to New Genesis straight away, you can just hand wave it. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. It's fine. But yeah, basically one big experiment. The dolls are artificial life forms created by Zaveto. This includes the Dark Falls doll. It's just all one big experiment, completely artificial, and that includes the actual environment of Halpha itself. It's all artificial, which is kind of a lot to take in, but it was kind of hinted at, right? There's like a couple of things, if you just pay attention, that just don't really make a lot of sense. The barriers around the regions don't really make a lot of sense. You see, I think it's even mentioned at some point in New Genesis that they just don't know what those are. They're just kind of there, and we just can't do anything about them. But then, also the dolls, so just the fact that they're called dolls, they're very clearly, artificial, kind of not that subtle, and just like the very existence of something called Dark Falls doesn't make a lot of sense, because you played base PSO2 or you're just vaguely familiar with stuff happening there. You know what the Dark Falls are, and that's off a completely old big bad that's already dead and gone. So it's kind of weird to begin with for there to be something called Dark Falls as an enemy in this game. And then, and there's just lots of other stuff like old enemies from the old planets popping up on Halpha. A lot of stuff that just didn't make sense. That makes a lot of sense considering that this is, again, it's all artificial. This is just one big experiment led by Zaveto. So we've kind of been given more questions than answers for most part. Because now we've got the Starless. The Veto seemed to have maybe stopped their initial spearhead force, so maybe we're safe for now, but obviously assuming in the next part of the story we'll be tackling them. I don't know if we'll be moving off of Halpha, but it does seem pretty likely. But it's a lot, right? It's a lot. And one thing I do want to mention is it does kind of feel like chapter 5 sort of shifted the pacing of how the story has been told in this game. So far in all the previous chapters of the game, it kind of felt like the focus was initially story, and then it shifted over to the individual character stories, right, in the middle of like the chapter, right? And it's kind of felt like that for me, at least, in every single chapter up to this point in chapter 5, which obviously at first the focus was on Manon, and eventually towards the end we shift over towards the plot being the center point of the story, right? So there's a really pretty drastic shift in sort of like pacing there for me that I wasn't really expecting. And I gotta say, overall, I really liked chapter 5. I honestly hadn't really cared too much about the story up until this point. Chapter 5's got me pretty excited for the future of the story of New Genesis. I'm really excited. I can't wait to see what we're doing next. And yeah, I saw some people talking about like they kind of wish like the Veto had more build up, that he just wasn't just on there. But like I mentioned, I do feel like a lot of these things were hinted at, if not the Veto himself, obviously not really hinted at, just kind of came out of nowhere. But his actions have sort of been like drip fed to us this whole time, right? If you were just simply paying attention to like the environments, the enemies, and things just didn't make a lot of sense, kind of drip fed to us, right? But I do kind of wish we had like seen Veto just a little bit like anything before, like even if it was just one scene, like at the end of like chapter like 3, where we like in the story we see a monitor of him and he's got like the skull face. If we have just seen like that screen at some point, that would have been really nice. But that's the only real complaint I have about the story at this point. It really feels like up to now it's basically just been more of a character introduction up until chapter 5, right? Just about introducing characters. And chapter 5 is the real like meat and potatoes of the, as soon as we just the beginning, the introduction of New Genesis story. But yeah, that's going to be it for this video. Let me know how you guys are feeling about the story. What do you think we're doing next? We stay on Alpha? We go into space? What do you think? I'm not sure personally, but I'm pretty excited regardless. It's going to be it for this video, and I'll catch you guys in one.